Hello. Um, we're going to be talking about communicating with the server today with fetch in JavaScript. It's the third leg of our tripod of goodness, whatever you want to call it. Um, yeah. So just a super quick review. We did manipulating DOM stuff on Tuesday. We did events on Wednesday yesterday. And so this will be the third part, which is uh, getting data from servers instead of just hard coding it, and making requests to servers. I guess they're all requests. Sending requests to servers to alter the data out there, making requests to add stuff, delete stuff, change stuff, and whatnot. Um, cool. Before we start coding, I just want to quickly talk about the substrate we'll be using, HTTP. Um, can anyone tell me what HTTP is? Start off.
It's a protocol for how the server connects to the client or something.
And vice versa. Yeah, the P part, the protocol, hypertext transfer or transport protocol. Yeah, that's the way. And protocol always sounds fancy, but it's basically just like an agreement that we make how to talk to each other. It's like saying like, "Oh, hello, good morning, how are you doing? Fine," instead of "Hey, sandwich, I hate you." Um, we have established ways of doing that, and it's literally just an agreement we make between these things. If you do certain things in a certain way, you will get certain responses. So when our client, which is our web browser or application or mobile app or whatever, makes a request over HTTP, it's going to be sending stuff over the line with that protocol. All that means is we're going to connect to a computer at a certain place, called a port, and we're going to send a bunch of text over that connection. And HTTP is a text-based protocol. Everything is a string when we send it over. Um, and if we format our request in the right way, we will get a response formatted, hopefully in a proper way as well. And that makes things real easy. Um, Things were a mess before in the early 90s. um, cool. So yeah, and this is what 90% of our web stuff is going to be based on. Um, there's a bunch of different kinds of requests. One of the parts of the protocol is the method part. Well, there's usually a header and a body. In the header, a lot of things are specified, like where you're going to be hitting stuff, like what kind of browser you are, a whole bunch of things. Important thing is the method, and there are a bunch of methods. The We're going to be concerned with four really, and that kind of map to our CRUD operations: our create, read, update, delete. And those are get for reading data, post for no, yeah, get for reading data, post for creating data, patch for changing data, and delete for deleting data. Uh, get is the easiest one and the one we'll be using most for starting off here. So we'll just do some examples and talk about that a little bit before expanding on, make sure we got everything down, and go from there. Um, so most of the time we're going to be making these requests from the browser. Um, Typing in a URL and hitting return, that's sending a GET request, right? Um, we can also send GET requests from JavaScript, and all the other kinds of requests. Sometimes it's a little bit messy to see what we're doing with our code. And so we have other tools to uh, test those out. There's a tool called Postman that folks like to use. I like to use Insomnia. It does the exact same thing, only a little bit prettier, I think. And basically, what those do, those are uh, clients that you can just type, go to this URL, use this method, send this kind of data, and it'll show you the request, the response, and all the information about that. All that is also available in the network tab for your requests that you make on the browser. This is just like a more expanded way of doing it. And we'll take a look at that in a moment. Yeah, I think it's a good start. Let's jump into some code and we'll talk our way through what we got here. Also, there, great. And code, look at that. Cool. So I'm going to start off just by creating our files here. Boom, and a JavaScript file. And hook this up here. And close that tab. Great. And so if we start up our live server here.
Really quick, I know you talked about it in the past, but how do you get all the HTML like formatting stuff to just
Yeah.
appear right at the start there?
Yeah. So VS Code has a like a macro system in it called Emmet, EMMET. And there's a lot of great, especially for HTML, there's a lot of great shortcuts you can use. One is just doing an exclamation point, and that will bring you up a template like that. You can also do a triple like that, and it'll just give you the straight up doc type. That just the straight up bang is will give you everything you see here. It's pretty sweet, but you can do all sorts of wild stuff. You can do and then it'll nope, that's not what I want. I want to do div ul li like that. You can like have it build out HTML for you. There's a lot of if you're curious, Emmet, EMMET, highly recommend checking it out. It can save a lot of time if you're writing a lot of HTML for sure.
Is that like a extension to download, or does it just have that?
It used to be an extension. I think it is built into the core now. If it does not come up automatically, make sure you're using the latest version, and if not, check the extensions. Yeah. Go. Right here. So many little windows. All right. So let's make sure that we've got our script working up. Can't read properties undefined. What are we doing? all I'm doing is console log boo. What have we done here? Always got to be something, right? Wow, I can't imagine what would be doing. Well, it's doing boo. It's supposed to be something else. I bet that's a live server thing. Sometimes live server is a little bit pesky. I used to use one called Light Server, but that's harder to use now, I guess. But anyway, here we are on our page. We would like to make a request to a server to get some information and display it on the page. There are several steps involved in this. The first of being, what server? Where are we going to make that request to anyway? So a couple answers to that. There are a billion open APIs available on the internet, and you'll be using one of them, or at least one for open APIs. You'll be using one of them for your projects in a couple of weeks. There are so many APIs available. I'll post this one in chat so we can see later. Where is chat? There it is. Feel free to peruse those at your leisure. We won't be using one of those now. We're going to be building our own. So phases 3 and 4 are all about building a whole backend server situation. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to I think in the curriculum it says like mocking or simulating or mimicking an API. It's just making an API, really. So we're going to make one with a thing called JSON server. And if we go back to here and pop open our terminal with control backtick. So do I have this installed already? Probably. Yeah, so JSON server is a command you can install with npm install JSON and -g for global JSON server. And that will make that command available to you anywhere. If you don't want to install it for whatever reason, you can also do npx for execute JSON server. And what that will do is it will look in your current directory for a file, and you'll tell it which one to watch. It'll be db.json or whatever it's called here, and that will start up a web server, basically looking at that JSON file, and it will create a basic RESTful API. We'll talk about REST later on. It'll start up a basic API using the data in that file. As implied by the file name there, it is going to be JSON formatted. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm just gonna, I'll call it JSON, db.json. Sure, why not?
Would we download that that JSON server like within a specific directory, or do we need to like do it from like a brand new terminal that's like we haven't done anything with yet?
Yeah, good question. So if you install it with the global flag there, it'll be available everywhere forever. If you only want it to be installed in that project or repo or whatever, you can leave off the G and it should install it only for that directory. So it'll only work in that directory. I use it everywhere all the time, so I just install it globally. Cool, yeah, thanks for asking. So yeah, I'm just gonna great. So JSON, probably familiar with some JSON stuff already. It is again a text or string based format that looks like a JavaScript object, has some restrictions. The restrictions are there needs to be one base level object, whether that's a value or an array or an object itself, and the keys all have to be in quotes. Other than that, it looks pretty much like a JavaScript object. So I'm not going to create one by hand, though, because that's what we have computers for. There are many ways to do this. Makaru, Faker. I've asked ChatGPT in the past to make me some fake data, but this is a nice way to do it. You can select a bunch of different fields. You can make them, there's a million things you can do if you want to make fake data with that, and you can say how many you want. So I'm just gonna get 20 rows here. I'm gonna make sure they're in a JSON format, and yeah, let's generate that data. Nope, I didn't do that. Let's preview that data. Great. I'm gonna copy that here. It did download the file for me, but I'd rather just copy it. Great. And so I'm just going to paste that into my JSON file. And look, now I have a database. This is an array at the base, and it's an array of objects. Each object has keys and values. Right now, it's IDs, first name, last name, email, gender, and IP address. Again, these could be anything. There could be nested values, which is why we recommend the object ball thing. Again, it could be like arrays of arrays with objects of arrays, and so on. But we're just going to do top level data here. So this is what our data looks like. And I'm going to start up the server. If I've done everything correctly, data must be an object. Okay, great. Yeah. For JSON server, the base one has to be an object. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make an object by wrapping this in curlies, and we're going to give this a key. And this is important in JSON server because this is how it determines what resource it's calling it. So let's just call these users, yeah. And we need to put them in quotes. Oops, like that. And with a colon. So now we have a base object with a key called users, and that key's value is going to be a list of objects. So now when we start up JSON server, so it's started up, and here's the resource path it gave us. So if I pop this open in my browser, thank you, Makaru, for your service. Look at this. We've got all of our data showing up. Now we just made a GET request. We put something in the location bar, hit return. That's going to make a GET request to that URL. It's going to give us data back, and the browser is going to serve that up. So here's all our stuff. So now that we know we have a URL that we can use, now we can make a request to that URL with JavaScript instead of with the browser. Bump that up a little bit. Cool. So let's talk about how we do that. I'm not going to worry about our data anymore. And when we make requests to the server, it gives us a log here, so it's nice to see. It's good for debugging. All right. We know our console log is working. Here we've got some weird error. I'm going to ignore it for now. So let's talk about fetch, baby. Fetch is a built-in JavaScript command, keyword, function that sends a request asynchronously and returns something. Can anyone tell me what asynchronous means in this context?
It's outside the standard flow of execution of the code.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So normally we just do stuff top down, right? And it goes from top to bottom and executes code, bam, 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 bam. Asynchronous code basically says, I'm going to start this process off, and I'm going to let you know when it comes back. I'm just going to copy paste from my notes here, so I have to type it all. Blam. And anyone know how it does that? How it lets us know when it's come back?
With promises.
Yeah, promises. Awesome. A promise is kind of what it says on the box. It is a promise to do something and let us know when it's done. Promises can sound a little bit intimidating at first, but they're very, very simple. You can, if we had more time, one of our exercises would be to build your own promise library. It's like 10 lines. They're basically objects, and that object can be in one of three states. It can be pending doing stuff, and it can have done stuff successfully or not, and that's it. And it'll call a then function when it's done, or a catch function when there's an error. Cool. So let's take a look at what that looks like in practice. So to start off, we're just going to do a fetch. This is our function here. By default, fetch sends an HTTP request as a GET, so we don't need to specify that at all. I'm going to throw a constant in for our user API, call it, and that API is the same one as we have here. Localhost 3000 users. Cool. And so I can just say fetch user API. API. Great. And this will do something. So if we watch our stuff, yeah, it reloaded and it made that request. Awesome. We're not seeing anything yet though. Fetch returns a promise. Fetch is a function in JavaScript that returns a promise object. So there's two ways we can grab it. Since it's a promise, promise is just an object, it's a value, we could actually catch it like this. And then if we console log promise, we can actually see over here our promise is pending. Oh, now it's fulfilled, and then it has a response. Cool. So that's our promise. What can we do with a promise? A couple things. We can literally a couple things. We can listen for. So under the hood, a promise sets off a process. When it happens, it has two methods inside that it can call, two functions inside that it can call, then and catch. Then is the one we're going to be concerned about most of the time. Then is a function that it calls when it's done. And the function then takes another function as an argument. It will call that function with the response. Sounds like a lot. What does that look like? I can say promise then. So this is the function that the promise will call after it's done. And I can give it a function in here. So I can say, I'm just gonna do an arrow function that says, so it gets the data. And I'm just gonna console log the data. And so this is gonna look like, hey, here's our response. So if it did the thing, it's going to return the response. And what it responds with from a fetch is a response object. So we need to do an extra step here. We need to turn it into JSON first. Fortunately, we can chain thens. So we can say promise then, and the response object has a method on it that turns it into JSON, which is also asynchronous for some reason. So we can say response JSON to response to JSON, response to JSON. Yeah, that's it. So our promise, when it's done, is going to call then with this function. That function is going to take the response and call response JSON on it, which is going to give us another promise. We can call that then on that promise, and that will take the data, and we're going to console log that data. Am I lying? No, I'm not. Hooray. There's all our data. Look at that. And one additional step, we don't need to catch it in a variable like that, but you can, which is really useful because they're just objects. So you can store them somewhere. You can put them in an array or another object, or keep them in a variable, pass them to functions, whatever you like. You probably won't need to do that in the course of this, maybe your final project, but just keep it in the back of your mind that it's just a thing. But what we're going to do most of the time is just chain it off of the fetch. Cool, we don't need that anymore. So this is what it's going to look like most of the time. We're going to have an API URL. We're going to do a get to that API. We're going to get the response from that API and turn it into JSON. And then we're going to take the data from that JSON and do something with it. In fact, since this is a function and console log is just a function, we can simplify this like that. So nope, not like that, like that. So basically that's saying, take the response you get and just pass it to the console log function, and that will console log that out. Great, and we have data. So the asynchronous nature means that if I want to do something like let data equal nothing, just let data. In here, if I did a function that was like JSON data equals JSON. So we're going to get that response and set it to our data variable here. And so if we console log out data here, what do we expect to get? Wes. Oh, you're muted.
I was saying I was gonna phone a friend. No.
What's your guess?
Would it log all of the user data in the API?
That's a reasonable guess. Anyone else have a different guess or agree? Or disagree?
Would it do the same thing as it did last time and just like log the JSON of the data?
Okay, cool. Let's take a look. Oh, undefined. Why is it undefined? Ryan, any ideas?
Do we need to be looking at the body of the response?
So the JSON thing turns the body into a JSON.
Okay.
Good guess though. What this is doing is basically, well, it's doing exactly what we're asking it to do, right? We're saying make a fetch asynchronously. When the fetch comes back, do all this stuff. But before it comes back, console log out data. So basically, we're asking it to see this before it comes back. And just the way JavaScript is built, no matter how fast it comes back, there's always going to be like one tick before it comes back. So anything that's kind of sequential after an asynchronous request is going to execute first. Then the request will come back and do the thing. So if we wanted to actually see it, I'll do so if we actually want to see it, we can put our stuff in the then. So to kind of walk through this, we are setting our empty variable. We're saying, hey, JavaScript, go do a fetch. While you're doing that, we're going to keep doing our stuff. Then we're going to console log this. Then when the fetch comes back and turns it into JSON, then it's going to set the data and log it out. And yeah, so before it returns, it's undefined. After it returns, it's like that. And this is not intuitive, I don't think. This is something that you're going to make mistakes in several times before you start catching on, I think. Sometimes 30 years. Yeah, so this is one of those things that is a concept that needs to click. You can kind of boilerplate it, just copy paste like this and get it to work. But once you get past the trivial stuff, like understanding exactly how asynchronous requests work is going to be super key, not just here, but in a lot of places. Ask me some questions about this.
In that function there, what exactly is the thing you have highlighted doing?
This is just setting, so then we'll call this function when the promise is resolved. So this function is taking in the data that's returned from the promise, and it is doing some stuff with it. So what it's doing here is it's just setting this empty variable to the value of the JSON that came back.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. More questions?
The fetch is the asynchronous command, right?
Yeah.
So anything inside the asynchronous command, if we wanted to run attached with that, we have to keep it inside the curly braces, right?
In the then function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't just have to be console. It could be whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And we will definitely do that right now, actually. So like we had the console log there before, let's just write a function, because if we do anything meaningful here, it's going to get messy. So I'm gonna just this is a terrible name. Just like handle data or handle JSON. So it's gonna take some JSON, and we're just gonna do this stuff here. And so now we can just substitute that function. So now it's making the fetch, turning the response into JSON, and then whatever comes back, it's going to pass it to this function. And so we've written this function to take the JSON, set data to it, and then do our console log. Should work exactly the same as it did before. Blammo, it does. Cool. So now we can start doing some interesting stuff here, right? Let me take the data part out for now and talk about what we might want to do. Console log JSON. Fetch data. Cool. So now it should just log out our data. Fantastic. And this is like literally the first step. Anytime I'm writing something that uses a fetch, just like make sure the JavaScript is hooked up, make sure I'm doing the fetch right, make sure the data is coming back the way I expect, making sure I'm looking at the right place, and so on. Cool. So let's do something with this data. So we've got some data. Let's just say I want to make a list of users, first and last name, and their email address. Say. So I'm going to change up my HTML here. Current users, bam. I'm going to throw in an unordered list and give an ID user list. Cool. So now we are hooked up to do the thing, and this should be able to happen by now. This is stuff we did on Tuesday. As it is now, nothing's going to show up on the page because we're not doing anything yet. But that invisible list is hanging out right there, just waiting for it. So if we want to populate that list with our users, where do we start? Anthony.
We would need to pull their first and last name.
Yeah, so let's get the first and last name. So we'll say constant first name equals JSON. Is it just first name? No, I lost my data. First underscore name, great. And we'll say last name. Cool. And let's do the same for the email address while we're here. JSON email, great. And let's just construct a string here while we're at it. Const display equals. We'll use a template literal, and we'll do first name, last name, and email address. Meow. There we go. And let's just console log this out. So now we should have undefined, undefined, undefined. Oh no, what happened? What do we need to do here? Where is the first name and last name attached in our data here? John, any ideas?
It's in the, well, since it's an array, do we have to pull it out in the block format?
Yeah, so how do we do something with a bunch of stuff in an array? We have our array. We'll call it user array. That's more useful. How do we do something for each element of an array? I see Ryan smiling.
With the for of thing.
The for each.
Oh,
Cool. And for each takes a function. So you know what? I'm just gonna break this out into another function to keep it tidy. I'm gonna say we'll call it display user. And let's write a function that's function display user. And that takes a user. So for each item in this array, it's going to in turn pass each item to this function here. So this function is going to take one of these user objects. And now we can see that we can pull a first name, last name, and email off of each one of these users. And there's our users right there. Cool. Questions about that process there? Kind of went through it a little fast. Cool. And at this point, this is just JavaScript. Like if we didn't have the fetch here and this user array was just hard coded here, that's the same thing. So the only difference there is instead of having a hard coded array that we're going through, we're making a request and then we're saying, hey, with the stuff you get back from the request, do this thing to it instead of the thing that we declared statically. Cool. So this is just JavaScript. There's no problem. So instead of console logging the display, I'd like them to be added as list items on this list. Anyone want to take a crack at that?
We create element.
Yeah.
And it would be just like a create element, or sorry, document.create element parentheses li.
Mm-hmm. And how do I set the?
And then let li equal display.
Yeah, I'm going to use a const just for kicks to grab the element, and then I need to set the text content of it.
Yes.
Cool. So that's created our element and set the content of the element to what we want. What's the last step we need to do to get it to show up on the page?
then append it.
It to the parent.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the user list. I'm going to make that a little global variable up here. User list, is that available? Yeah. Document, get element body. Nope. And get element body. So now I've got that list there, and here I can just append it to that list. I'm gonna close this. Cool. There we go. Look at that. So we created our string and we created our list elements and put it up there. It's just that easy. It's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of moving parts. Not that easy. Cool, but this is going to get you pretty far right here. How do folks feel about this? Any questions or confusions or anything? It's not like crystal clear here. You want to make sure we smooth out stuff here while we're all here instead of later on when you're banging your head against it at 3 a.m.
I feel like this is a question I'll have like for everything, but like what's like some real world examples like where I would maybe like if I work at a company, right, and I need to fetch their own data, or like what times would I want to grab stuff from the world?
Yeah, so say we have a a product list of stuff that we're selling on our e-commerce site. We're going to, the user will search for something, we'll send that search request to our server, that will send us back a list of objects that match that search. And then we will go through each one of those objects, pull out, we'll go through that list, pull out each object, and we'll probably have some function or probably some component in a framework that lets us put that information on the page one way or the other. Or like a user's shopping cart. A user logs in, we make a query to get the items that are currently in their cart. And same thing, we take each item off that list and display it on the page some way. Yeah, a billion things. A Twitter, like make a request for all of my posts on my timeline, pull each one off and throw it on the page.
Cool. Super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So what other questions do we have here?
Something probably really basic, but why are there always the what they call it, the open and close tags around the email? So like in the display variable where it says first name, last name, email. Is that just a functionality issue?
That's just a traditional way of displaying the email. I just did that to sort of differentiate it. That doesn't need to be there. That's just it's easier to read the other way, I think. But otherwise, it's just a display. We could do like email.
Got it. So it's not like it's not a necessary functionality, but it's just a standard.
Yeah. You'll see, like if you look at your if the headers in your email, if you use Gmail or something, it'll show all the email addresses like name and then email in brackets like that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Again, this is just and that's actually a really good question. So I think I've kind of glossed over this a few times in previous lessons. This is something called a template literal, which is a fancy name for saying a string that you can put stuff in. So if we have a usual string, it just looks like whatever in quotes or in single quotes. If we use backticks like this, then we can throw in these constructions here. So it'll always be $, curly brackets, and then some JavaScript. Like we could put in 35 divided by 7, and it'll put 5 everywhere. So inside these brackets is just some JavaScript. In our case, it's useful to put the variables in there and it will give the value of those. So this lets us easily construct a string like that. We could also do like, const display 2 equals like first name plus a space plus last name plus a colon and a space plus and a open plus email plus close bracket. Like those two do the exact same thing. Some people like it this way. I'm not going to argue with them as long as it works. If I was working with them, I would probably request to change it to that because that's easier to read, I think. But yeah, so that's what this whole thing does. Template literals basically just like lets you put JavaScript in strings. Super handy. And some people will say it's new JavaScript in big quotes. It's new as of 2015. So it's new to old JavaScript programmers. Awesome question though. Thank you. What else we got? Cool. I think what I'm going to do, I don't want to overwhelm y'all with this because this is a lot already. I think I'm going to briefly touch on the other 3 methods because they all kind of look/work the same. And I think I'll leave you to do labs and exercises on those, and then we'll talk about them more tomorrow and do examples of each one in depth, and then that'll be kind of like tying the whole thing together because that's basically making your way up there. So these are GET requests. This is a GET request. We are saying get whatever data is at that URL. If our URL was, I'm going to console log. If our URL was, HTTP, HTTPS google.com, right? It would make a request to Google, and then we can't do it because there's security stuff. But basically, it would give us back the HTML for the page. So it's just making a request, getting whatever is there, and coming back. We also want to be able to change data. So we want to create resources or records. We want to delete them. And we want to change them or edit or update. Fortunately, there are HTTP methods that correspond to each one. This one's called post, and it's called that historically because it's a post from a form for some reason. It's stuck. Delete, very simple. And update is called a patch. You will also see put sometimes. Also updating resources, very slight semantic differences that really aren't worth worrying about. Technically, patch updates a part of a resource and put replaces the resource with something else, but I wouldn't worry about it. Just use patch. So cool. So delete is the easiest case, right? We just need to tell it to delete a certain resource. First of all, let me go back a second. When we do our fetch here, we can include we can that's a weird way to call it. We can include parameters in an object, so we can give it more details about what we're asking for. Often, so one of the things is headers, and that's gonna be another object. This is something I either copy paste or write a function for all the time because it's content type is application JavaScript, and also accepts. So those basically say to the request, hey, I'm sending along JavaScript, or this should be JSON, sorry. I'm sending along JSON, and I expect to get JSON back. That's telling the server what to expect. Whether it respects it or not is another story. This is going to be the same every time you send a request. I will often just make it a constant up here and then use it down. Oops, what was that all about? And then use it down here. Fun little JavaScript trick. So if I say set headers to this constant, if the name of the key and the variable are the same thing, I can just do that. Nice little shortcut. You're going to see it everywhere. You don't have to use it, but do get used to it. So headers, those are going to be the same thing every time. This is usually how I do it because I'll be making different kinds of requests all the time with the same headers. I don't want to type it over and over again. It also takes a method, and we can say get. So this is the exact same as this up here. If it's a get, we don't need to include the other stuff. We just assume that's going to do a get. But this is handy now because we have other methods that we want to do. So I'm going to do delete first, even though traditionally we do post first. Delete is the easiest one because basically all you're doing is deleting a resource. What does that look like though? So here we're getting all the resources just by doing /users. If I want to get a resource, let's get Philippe down here. This you can say resource /ID, and it will give you the single resource that matches that ID, which is handy when we want to delete a single resource. So again, I'm going to use a template literal here because it's going to be a different URL, right? I'm going to say get the user API, and I'm going to say 5 and delete Philippe. We don't even need to put a then on this if we trust it. Usually you'll put a then on it and do like I'll update the page without that resource. That's a nice thing to do. You don't have to do that if you want. It will delete the resource regardless. And to prove it, nope, up. Let's reload the page. And there's no Philippe anymore, so it's just reloading over and over again. Cool. So super quick way to do that. But this is the basic format for delete. Post and patch works similarly. We're going to do a fetch to our, and we're going to, with post, we're going to just post to the API. With patch, we need to send something along with it, and we are updating a single one. So we're going to have to do something like this. Oops. ID. Cool. So let's do post first because that's the easier case. Post, we're gonna need to send the parameters along. We're gonna need to send our headers. We need to tell it that we're doing a post. I don't know if that needs to be all caps all the time. Actually, I do not have it. And then the important thing is we're gonna send a body. This body is a string, not an object. It's a string, it's a string, it's a string. So if we have, say, const new user equals, name, whatever, and it has all the other stuff in it, we can't just say new user like that. It doesn't know what to do with an object. So we need to turn that object into a string format that it knows how to handle. And that is going to be JSON. So we can say JSON, JSONify, stringify that. And that will turn that object into a string that we can then send along. If we do a .then on here, first we do our little JSON dance that we have to do, then that will return the, let's do here, do something with the new resource created. It will send back an object or a JSON string that we turn into an object that reflects the resource that was just created. So then we can add it to the page or alert it or whatever. And patch is the same kind of thing. We need to do our thing. We need to send headers. We say method patch. And we're going to send another thing, but this is just the field or property updating.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
How's it look like if we forget to put that JSON.stringify on the body?
Then it will kick back an error, and it'll say like, I don't know what to do with this. It'll be a 400 something error, I think. But yeah, so it won't do the request, but it will kick back an error, and you can handle that error. That answer what you're asking?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. So I'm not going to go into these in depth. These are we'll talk more about this tomorrow, so we can do it at our leisure after you've gotten used to doing a fetch. But just for reference, they're not magic. They're not that different. It's just got extra bits on it. So yeah, there'll be labs and exercises to do that, and we will go into it in depth tomorrow. One thing, actually, now that you mention it, I did want to say is we can also chain a catch. So catch is the function that it calls when we get an error back instead of our thing. So right now, I think I unbroke everything. Did I unbreak everything? Probably not. got our thing. Da-da-da-da. Oh, then wait. Unbroken. Nope. All right, I messed up the database somehow. Yeah, I just messed it up.
Isn't it handle JSON there instead of display user?
Display user handle JSON. Yep, you're right. I didn't mess it up that bad. Good catch. Awesome. Thank you. So if everything works, it's going to call our thing. If something doesn't work, like let's say it's user instead of users, then that's going to not be a right URL, and it's going to give us back an error. Oh, hey, look, this is the error that the fetch gives, but here's what we did. We logged out the error, and I can, we can show that even more here. We can say, got a bad response. Boo. And show the error. Got a bad response. Boo. So this is nice because instead of just like bombing out and letting it do whatever it's going to do, we can actually do something here. We can prompt the user, if the server's sending back good information, like, oh, hey, we can't create a user without a password, you can prompt the user for that. This basically just lets you handle errors in a more useful way and or more user-friendly way. If you don't put the catch there, it'll still give us the 404. But this just lets us do what we want with it in addition to that. So that's like you were asking before, if something went wrong there, that's how we would catch that error. Cool. I think that's about all I want to talk through today. Let's ask some questions.
I just had a quick question on how you're doing the double slash at the beginning of like several lines at a time.
So you can select it and hit Command / and that will comment or uncomment that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Learn your VS Code shortcuts. It'll save you so much time. Moving lines around instead of copy pasting, duplicating lines, moving those around, all sorts of good stuff. Selecting multiple things. It's learn your editor. It's going to save you so much time. And I'm still picking up tricks as I go along. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. So that's where like watching other people code, not even advanced people, just like someone who like, oh, I picked up VS Code last week and I looked at the documentation and saw this. I'm like, oh, I've been using it for a year and I never even thought about that. So yeah, tools are important. Other questions? All right. That felt pretty good, I think. Yeah. So I will put this video up in the usual places, put it on the playlist and post it on the channel. I'm not going to post the code. I think it's better off if you do that manually, get that muscle memory in your fingers there. It's pretty, it's not worth copy pasting. Yeah. Any questions about anything before we move along? Awesome. Cool. As usual, thanks for hanging out. I'll get this all out directly, and I'll see you all in a little bit.